Jason Louv, and this is the Ultraculture podcast. My guest today is Timothy Wyllie, a graphic artist and writer who has specialized in the study of non-human intelligences, such as angels, ETs, and dolphins, after a near-death experience in 1973. Here's a bit about him from his bio. Wyllie was born in Great Britain in 1940 and raised in London. Having wended his way through an English public school education and then 7 years further study at college, he qualified as an architect. In the late 70s, Timothy began a systematic exploration of out-of-body states. This led to experiments in telepathic communication with dolphins and an open invitation to contact with non-physical beings that continues to this day. During this time, he was also running his own business in New York City, marketing a system he had co-devised for storing and filing color photographs. He retired from the business community in 1981 and turned full-time to his creative endeavors. As a musician, Timothy has made several tapes of what he calls boson music, a true-age improvisational jazz, shamanic music of the heart, as well as a series of guided visualization and meditation tapes. Also an artist, he's currently working on a virtually endless progression of drawings of sacred landscapes. Timothy travels frequently to give lectures and seminars or to investigate sites and locations for his drawings. He's the author of Ask Your Angels, a practical guide to working with the messengers of heaven to empower and enrich your life, Dolphins, ETs, and Angels, and a co-author of Adventures Among Spiritual Intelligences, Angels, Aliens, Dolphins, and Shamans. He lives in the high desert in New Mexico. I first heard of Timothy Wyllie's work with disincarnate intelligences while studying magic with Genesis Prior Peorage, who often spoke very highly of his friend's research. So, of course, I decided to speak with him for this podcast on the occasion of the release of his new book, Awakening of the Watchers, which is out now from Bear & Company. We had a great conversation about angels, ETs, the nature of consciousness, the fate of the multiverse, and all of the normal Ultraculture podcast topics, which went very, very well. So I think you'll really enjoy the conversation. And definitely, after listening to this, check out magic.me, my school for magic, meditation, and mysticism, where you can learn how to explore inner space, as we talk about in this show, to make radically positive changes in your life through a series of online courses in chaos magic, yoga, astral travel, and lots more. It's at www.magick.me. Okay, on with the show. Okay, so Timothy Wyllie, how are you?
Very well, thank you. Very well. And you?
Very good. So I have your new book in front of me, which is called Awakening of the Watchers, The Secret Mission of the Rebel Angels in the Forbidden Quadrant. And if I'm correct, it's your fifth or sixth book in this series where you've been talking about rebel angels and fallen angels and angelology. Is that right?
Yes, it's actually the fifth book.
Okay.
I think the one that probably is a little confusing was the Return of the Rebel Angels, which actually is one of my books. And I make quite a distinction in between my books, in other words, the books that I've written, and these Rebel Angel books, of which 5 have now been published, which are really, really very deep collaborations with a discarnate Rebel Angel that I have called Georgia. And over the years, and it has been many years, we've become good friends and quite sufficient collaborators. And when I say collaborators, it's not me taking dictation. It's kind of, her throwing up ideas, we discuss them, she'll sort of guide me here, guide me there. They're very much her books, her concepts, although I think of myself as a junior partner in the association.
Okay. I'm wondering how you define what an angel is, because I have a feeling that your definition may be more elaborate than the general understanding.
Yes. Yes, it's kind of difficult, isn't it, to kind of get into this area after we've been so long kind of divorced from the greater reality, the larger reality. So, angels are as real as in their dimension as we are real in ours. Right? They're real beings. They're different from us in many ways, but they're also very similar to us in many ways. Otherwise, they wouldn't understand us. Right? Now, on a very larger scale, you can break the sort of the multiverse down into two major segments. One is the outer worlds, right, that we can observe, that we can visit in spaceships and whatnot. And then there is the inner world, and the inner worlds are the worlds of the angels, right? And these are the worlds that we contact through our inner abilities, our imaginations, and our intuitions. These are what takes us into the inner worlds. And the inner worlds basically set the patterns for the outer world, right? In a sense, we're the hands of the angels, right? As extraterrestrials are the hands of their angels, right? And so it goes. They guide the whole great, the great adventure, in a sense, because we're all on this massive adventure of discovery of the universe and discovery of ourselves. And this continues. This continues after we die. And we move into the inner world. Right? So that's, I think, probably the widest way I can explain it.
Okay. I'm curious, do you still take a Judeo-Christian view of angels, or is that something that's changed?
No, I mean, angels appear, I think, in every sort of religious system, or at least in the old days, perhaps religious systems now that don't have angels. The Judeo-Christian concept of them is just one concept. You can go to another religion and find another concept, but the situation is that they all know that angels exist. Right. Now, obviously, since the Industrial Revolution, and perhaps a little before that, there has been a decline of belief in angels, but not so much a decline of belief, but more concentration on the physical, to the detriment, I think, of the spiritual. But the Judeo-Christian, I think something's right, but it gets an awful lot of things wrong.
Well, I ask this because it's definitely, I mean, if you read Revelation or Scripture, the angels are, or the Quran, the angels are specifically messengers of Jehovah or Allah, and certainly in Revelation are at war with non-believers. But then often, I'll often talk to people who are into alternative spirituality or New Age beliefs, or are just followers of other spiritual paths. And I'll often hear the idea that, for instance, the various pagan gods or, helper beings in other religions are just a kind of like a different language for talking about angels, that angels just appear in different forms in other cultures. But it seems to me like it can't really be both ways. Obviously Scripture is so strict on what angels are, and I'm curious where you fall on that debate, if it is one.
Yes, of course, we have a vastly oversimplified idea of what angels are. Whatever religion you go into, you'll find a tremendous oversimplification, and probably a lot of priestcraft and a lot of fudging, and why not this, why not that? But as I say, the common denominator is the fact that there are this I would say race of beings. Spirit, of course, is much larger than that. But there are these beings who accompany us in our journey through life, and as they accompany us through our previous lives as well. So I think it's probably more productive to think of oneself as part of a team. We're the one down here. We've got a team. Some of them can see a little further than us, can see a little deeper than us, and if we can learn to listen to them and to work as a team, tremendous things can be accomplished.
Okay. And how do you recommend, I'm curious how you recommend contacting angels or becoming aware of those aspects of reality?
Well, I and a couple of friends have written a book on this, so if you will pardon a little bit of self-promotion.
Yes.
As far as I'm concerned, Ask Your Angels, which is a book we wrote back in the late 80s, early 90s, is, as far as I'm concerned, probably the best book around for really getting into, down into what is required to be able to make contact and then develop a whole relationship with angels. Most of the problems lie with us, with our disbelief, our low opinion of ourselves. Why would angels ever, talk to me? That sort of thing. And then that kind of scientific rationality. Of course, angels can't exist. I mean, if they existed, we could see them. Well, no, actually. We only see a very small spectrum of what's really going on anyway, as we know. So it's more a question of finding a way, and this is where Ask Your Angels is so useful, because we were given something called the grace process, which was actually given to us by the angels as a series of meditations that take you through the process of being able to identify these blockages, where they came from, and allows one to be able to talk to these entities, that cloud our minds, right? And then how to release them with the angels' help. So that's really the basic exercise. Now, I should say one thing.
Yes.
Most traditional religions advise, don't get involved with angels until you're a little bit older. And the reason for this, I think, and I speak of someone who is a little bit older, is that, the early part of one's life is more to do with, families, business, games, functions, whatever, relationships. And I think in many ways one has to get a lot of that out of the way, in order to be able to settle down and to be quiet enough and to move slowly enough to be able to hear the subtle voices of the angels.
Interesting. I know that, I guess the traditional start age for Kabbalah is 40, and obviously the yogic paths have the initial 2 rungs of purification, where your life has got to be stable before going into the subtle worlds.
Yes, because it's very consuming. Once you start, I mean, it's like a relationship with a passionate person, who you meet, and somehow you think they know more about you than you know about yourself, and they've got access to information that you have no idea about, and also, we form a function for them as well, because we actually actualize their ideas, their concepts in many ways, which is not to say we don't have our own ideas, of course, but a lot of the patterns come down from the angels.
I'm curious what you think of, having spent so much time interacting with these levels of reality, I'm curious what you think of some of the classical manuals on angel contact, particularly Crowley or the Grimoire tradition from Europe. It has various conjurations and seals and incantations for contacting angels. How you feel about that now?
Well, I should say in advance that this is from my understanding. I haven't experienced, for instance, Crowley's meditations or John Gee's or anything like that. But what I can say is that if you look at the experience of people who have made contact with angels down through certainly through the last sort of 800 years, for instance, you see how something that was very, very difficult and very, very challenging, has become more and more easy. I won't say easy, more and more fluid, more and more accessible down through the ages. Now, Crowley, I personally am not quite sure whether the Awaz, or whatever the entity's name was really an angel. I think there are other explanations, because, of course, it's very busy out there. Somehow, for instance, it's like going to, I don't know, a North African country, And when you go there, you think, oh, well, everybody's from this particular country. And then you spend a day or two there, and you realize there are two very large tribes,
Right.
And then you go upriver, and you find, my goodness, there are tribes, many, many, many more tribes. And it's really like this with the inner worlds. It's complex. It's very, very, I won't say controlled, but it's very disciplined. As far as I can see, everything is moving along just fine. Everybody's dancing as fast as they can, and we're moving. It's difficult and it's awkward and it's painful, but we're moving through this birthing process into this genuinely new age, which is going to be very different. Very different.
That's certainly been my experience as well, and that's been very maddening in a way of trying to get a handle on what's going on out there, because it's never simple and it's never like it is in the books, and it's hard to talk to people about it because if people haven't had the experience, then they can't talk about it. And also people tend to be, if they're not very experienced, then they tend to be so open that they think everything is the same thing, more or less.
Exactly.
And that's it's very hard to get. And like your comment about Crowley, we have all these channeled transmissions and things like this, but who's to say, what those actually are?
No, ultimately one has to find out for oneself, and one has to trust one's own inner sense and go with it, That's really the only thing. Now, if something in Crowley's meditations, trigger something, then fine, that's wonderful. But it's actually a lot more simple, I think, than has been thought about in the past. As far as I know, the angels are anxious to speak to us. You see, the impulse to talk to us comes very much from them. It's us who make it difficult.
Okay. So what would the simplest method of, you had already said, talking about clearing disbelief or I guess low self-image you had mentioned, what would you say the simplest method of breaking through would be?
Well, there really is no simple method. It's not a simple process. It's not something that can be done overnight. It's an incremental process. For instance, it took me 2 years from the time that I was told by somebody else, an angel coming through somebody else, that I didn't need to have a medium, that I could do it myself. From that moment, it took 2 years to get a real, good relationship with a couple of my guardian angels. So, and now I think probably with what we now know, it could be done a lot faster. But it isn't a simple process, and it isn't something that can be taken that lightly.
Okay.
As I said, it's very consuming. It takes a lot of energy. It takes a lot of silence and quiet. But it's immensely rewarding because, of course, you find yourself in the right place at the right time. Interesting.
You mentioned John Dee, who's somebody that I have a huge interest in. And I have a couple questions about that. One is, obviously in Dee's work, there's this concept of the angelic language. And I'm wondering if that's something that you have had experience with, or something that maybe you've seen in inner visions, something that is suggestive of that a type of inner language.
I played with the idea, but more as an artist, plays with just letting his hands go and, letting thoughts come in. I'm not sure that a language is really necessary.
Okay.
To say the truth, because the intuitive connection. Now, don't forget that John Dee was using a medium. So that's, as far as I'm concerned, that's one step away from, the real essence of it.
Interesting.
And I would say, without really knowing too much about John Dee's psychology, that he was probably, giving away his power in a sense, to whatever his name was.
Kelly. Yeah, Edward Kelly.
Yeah, Kelly, that's right. And who I think had some other agendas going, probably, put it that way.
Yes, that seems to be the case. But I think with Dee, he couldn't make he was so hyper rational, obviously, because he was a scientist and a mathematician, and
Yes.
and all of this.
Yeah.
That he could not, or he felt at least that he could not. His method was scrying, and he couldn't break through in terms of scrying. Although there's a really fascinating part in the records where an angel tells him, I think D at one point laments to one of the archangels that he can't scry, he can't see them in the scrying mirror. Kelly can, but D can only see them in his imagination. And the angel says that's actually better than scrying.
Absolutely. It's exactly that really corroborates my point. How interesting. I have never heard of that.
Yeah, it's buried. It's buried in there, and I don't think people have written about it. But I found that pretty fascinating, and it cuts to the core of what you're saying and what I've experienced also, which is that the real hurdle in teaching people intuitive processes or magic or psychic abilities is that it comes through the imagination, and obviously we have a bias in this culture that if it's through the imagination, it's not real, it's not valid information.
Yeah, we think of imagination as something imaginary, or something of creating the imaginary. I see it more as a sort of a two-way mirror, if you like, that can receive stuff and also, can be used as a mirror. It works both ways. I think some exploration of what they call an eidetic screen. Have you come across that?
What is it?
Concept, yeah. Eidetic screen is the kind of screen that we have in the back of our foreheads. That when we create images, they seem to float on this eidetic screen.
Ah,
right?
Okay.
Now, if someone takes it one step further and realizes the eidetic screen is itself a two-way device, in other words, can receive impressions as well as be the recipient of impressions created, from the imagination, if you like. But it's a nice little kind of hardwired way of looking at it.
Interesting. I'm curious. You also talk a lot about fallen angels and rebel angels, and which I think is maybe resonates with stuff in the Book of Enoch or some of the Gnostic texts. I'm curious what your beliefs on that are and how that differs from the general narrative of angels.
Yes. Well, the first thing is I've been a reader of the Urantia book for about 30 years, and I think one of the reasons that Georgia chose me as the person to really kind of work out what she wanted to work out, which was, what really was going on, in the 500,000 years that she's been here, what went on behind the scenes. Sorry, I digress myself. Could you ask me the question again?
Yes, I'm curious that you speak about rebel angels and fallen angels, and I'm curious what your beliefs on that are.
As I said, I've been a reader of the Urantia book for some years, and I don't know if you've become aware of it, but of all the cosmologies I bumped into over the years, I find it certainly the most reliable in the sense that it resonates best with my heart. Right? That feels right. That feels like it happened. And it's a very substantial book, purported to, I should say, channeled by the angels through the sort of the first half of the last century, I guess. It took a long time to come through and come out. It's a long book, over 2,000 pages, but it is very, very specific about the angelic, the story, if you like. So when I was, I don't know, when Georgia came to me, I guess I should say it that way, I think it was because I had some sort of basic understanding, that is that emerges out of the Urantia book, that she could then use as a sort of platform for telling her story, which both substantiated for me the validity of the Urantia book. You just have to pick it up to realize how very weird it is to be actually reading words that have come through the angelic intelligence And the angelic intelligence is very different from us. Interesting. It's rather more specific, it's more didactic. It's can be a little tetchy at times. It's not enormously humorous, although it can be very humorous at certain times. But it is somewhat different from us. It doesn't have these tremendous jumps of intuition that we're capable of making, of bringing things together that the angel would have no idea of bringing them together, for instance. That's our particular ability. Yeah, I mean, the idea of angels, yes, I came across them in my near-death experience. That's why I knew they were real. Right?
What was that experience?
In 1973, I basically died and was lifted out of my body and went through the whole near-death or after-death process. Was given the choice to continue or to return, and was told I had accomplished what I came to do. And then I saw angels, and then I got healed of what I was basically killing me, and came back a changed man. I mean, that's really where my adventure began, because I've been at it for a long time. But that's where this last sequence started from, and that's why I'm so, impelled to try and get across to some extent, or at least the people who've got the ears to listen, that yes, angels are real, very real indeed, and yes, when we die, we will encounter our angels. We will see them as friends, experience them as friends who know us, who love us, and we will continue our journey along with them. So it's probably worth getting in contact with them.
Okay, so yes, I've been reading this John Dee material, and the angels are extremely fire and brimstone and concerned with the expurgation of sin. Obviously, this is the 16th century, but often when I talk to trance mediums or channels or people who work with angels now, they definitely insist on a message of unconditional love, but that is not, it's certainly not what's in Scripture. So I again, it's interesting because that's interesting to me for a couple reasons. One is, one of the concepts from your work that Jen always impressed on me was the idea of midway creatures, and kind of what you were saying before, that there are so many different groups and tribes of spirits, essentially, and it's very hard to get a sense of who you're talking to. And obviously, when working with mediums or channels or things like this, the stories never quite corroborate.
True.
And so I guess I've got a couple questions on that. One is how you feel the angels feel on questions of morality, of human morality, and certainly judgment. You talked about meeting your angels after your death. And the second one would be, how do you know you've got an angel on the line?
Well, those are two very substantial questions. Well, let's take the second one first. How do we know we've got an angel on the line? As I said, it's a process. It isn't something you can sit down in an afternoon and, 5 hours later you're chatting with your angel. It can happen, right? If somebody is particularly open and particularly trusting of their own intuitions, it can happen. But with the general state of our consciousnesses, it really does take quite an amount of time. And there's a sort of testing that goes on, I frequently, simply ask the angels, to help in a particular situation. I'm driving. I don't want the police to stop me for some reason. I ask the angels, to please close the eyes of the policeman towards me. Now, who knows? Who knows ultimately? But it's an act of faith. It's an act that credits the angels with, the reality to be able to intervene for our benefit if one's about, good work and not, not asking angels who's going to win the next race.
Okay.
That's not what it's about at all. But it's basically, as I said, an incremental process that is more to do with trusting oneself than trusting in the angel. because as one learns more about oneself, one actually starts to discover what is truly oneself, and what has been grafted on through a lifetime of other people's ideas, other people's expectations. Right? This is what I mean by incremental. All those things have to be really examined and let go of. Right? And sometimes they don't want to be let go of. Sometimes they say, no, we're here, we're protecting you. You have to talk them into moving on and say, no, I can protect myself, thank you very much. Some entity that joined me at age 5, thought it could protect me. No, thank you, I don't need it anymore. So you got to go on. So that's in a sense part of learning the trust thing, because angels will tell you things that you don't know. Right? They'll tell you things that feel absolutely right about yourself that you don't know and that you could put to use. You don't get other entities saying things like that. It's really a different ballgame, from working through a medium or doing one of those almost like playing with Ouija boards or whatever. This is substantial and very deep. My own angle on it, to get back to, I think, the first question, which is the rebel angels. This really, because I have always felt in my heart some kind of, that I must have done something really awful to get here. That's the first thing, which came very young. Because I was born in a war. My first memories of bombs dropping on me. I had to spend half my life, dealing with all the various repercussions of what happens to a human psyche, when people drop bombs on him. So that was a provocation, believe me, because I just needed to know how did I get so damaged. And that started the search, I guess.
And
yes, back to the rebel angels briefly. So I started to, barreling into the archives and looking at these areas, and found very interesting how many cosmologies include some form of angelic, some form of rebellion, some form of war going on, above and beyond, which is affecting them.
Yes.
Now, again and again and again, you see it. But where it's most clarified, for me anyway, is in the Urantia book, where it is very specifically described as an angelic rebellion that affected 37 planets in a system of 1,000 planets. Only 37 were affected by it. We are one of those 37, and certainly one of the 3 worst affected by it. One of the outcomes of that is that the angels who were taking care of this particular planet also joined into the rebellion. So one of the outcomes is that we were cut off, or at least the whole system has basically been cut off from the rest of the universe. Because it's an enormous, inhabited, very well organized universe out there. And we've simply been cut off. Because what really happened in this rebellion, if you like, is that the angels who were taking care of the system of 1,000 planets simply sort of got together and said, listen, I think we can do better. We could do a better job. I think we can take more choices, more control. And this was the essential break. The break you see repeated again and again in centralized authorities, where at the edge of the centralized authority, you get the start of people saying, hey, wait a moment, I think we know more about what's going on here in our little patch than, they do in the center. So the outcome of it was that the powers that be, if you like, that I call MAR, Multiverse Administration, essentially said, all right, rebels, you think you know what you're doing? Yeah, go off. Let's see what you can do. And they, I don't know that they told them we're going to cut you off from the rest of the universe, but it's kind of fairly obvious outcome, I would guess. And we've been in this situation essentially for the last 203,000 years, according to your ancient book. Long, long time. But this is a time where we're coming out of it. The essential ingredients of the dispute have essentially been resolved. And now it's really a question of just letting things wind down. All the corruption, everything that's been baked into our systems is all sort of coming to the surface, and it's all being revealed. And, just as we have to clean ourselves up, the planet's also having to clean itself up. So we get all these revelations of corruption. This is the process of straightening up. And it's also giving each individual have choices, many more choices now than we ever used to have. And, of course, we can only go through having choices. And we have to make bad choices before we make good choices quite often.
Okay.
But when you see all this happening in the Middle East, what we're looking at, in the sense, is a population of people who've been so subjugated and suppressed and, kept under the thumbs of rulers for so many years. And now they're breaking out. They're able to think, my God, they're making a choice. I'm going to leave this country and go to another country. What a fundamental choice. I made it. I know how fundamental it is. I mean, that's how you grow up.
So in this narrative, are the rebel angels the good guys or the bad guys? Because obviously in the traditional scripture, the narrative is the rebel angels, or the fallen angels, become the legions of hell.
Yeah, you got to understand priestcraft.
Yes.
Priests need enemies. Religions need enemies. Otherwise, you really can't get a religion together unless you've got something to blame. Somebody out there to blame. I'm not saying that Lucifer and Satan were particularly honorable. They had their faults, but they certainly weren't as dreadful as we've come to think of them. You see, from the largest point of view, there are no enemies. It's more fiercer. It's more opposition has to be created in order to find out who we are. You can't be brave and knowledgeable and perceptive unless you have something, trying to prevent you from being brave and perceptive and everything. It is a fight. It's a fight to get there, and so it should be. But we're all doomed to become perfect. It's just a question of how long it takes.
So you feel this whole thing is orchestrated for human advancement?
Oh yes, yes. I mean, we're in a teaching. We're in a university, if you like, or more like a kindergarten, actually.
And what is the outcome? What is the final outcome meant to be?
Well, that's kind of up for grabs in many ways. I mean, one could say on one level that the students would never be allowed to blow up the classroom. Right? One could say that. Why? It wouldn't benefit anybody, if we blew up the planet or something like that. I don't think that is permitted. I think it's going to continue as long as beings need the experiences they have on a difficult planet. Now, I also believe that as a planet we are also moving into a new frame, right? Because I think a lot of the problems that we've been experiencing over the last, I don't know, maybe 10,000, 15,000 years are provided in a sense perhaps by the levels of corruption and the levels of difficulty that all of us have faced. It's never been an easy planet. It wasn't much easier in Atlantis. It was a little easier than Lemuria, but that was quite a long time ago, and they had a better handle on things than we do. Yeah.
Hmm. Well, I'm wondering what would a person who had fully graduated from this process look like?
Well, are you talking as individuals? You see, I mean, as individuals, I mean, we simply move through this frame. We learn what we learn, and then we move into the next frame, after we die. So, there are two things going along simultaneously. One is that each individual soul is going through its own learning process, right, which is us. And then there's a larger frame of what happens when all those individual souls all bump together and create a society and create, a social enterprise on the planet. What happens then? Now there have been planets that have, become uninhabitable through, through mortals, much like us, misbehaving, in very deep ways. So that's why I say it's somewhat up for grabs. Now, I also do know, and this might sound a little strange to some ears, but over the last few years, I have actually heard of at least 5 extraterrestrial evacuation plans, one of which says that they can get everybody off the planet in 20 minutes. So there's also that aspect to bear in mind. But it's really more to do with each individual.
Mm. So you've also written a lot about extraterrestrials and dolphins, and contacting these extra-human intelligences. I'm wondering how you see these other beings fitting into the tapestry.
Yeah, that's really how I started this more recent phase.
Okay.
Sorry, I need to wet my whistle. With dolphins, through a number of synchronicities back in the early 80s, I got to swim with a pod of dolphins off the coast of where was it? I can't remember where it was at the moment. And of course, from that period, that experience, I came to understand that we're sharing the planet with another, highly intelligent species. It's just that their intelligence is slightly different from ours. They move a lot faster. Their whole internal mechanisms work, I think John Lilly would say, between 10 to 20 times faster than ours do. So we miss the jokes, Now that then kind of, one of the questions I'd asked the dolphins was, well, since we've seen extraterrestrial craft known for coming and going from the water, what do you know about them? And I think the day later, my girlfriend and I were looking out the window in the evening, and boom, there we had our first extraterrestrial experience of, a craft just, and government crafts don't do dancing in the sky over a 20-minute period.
So you had this experience with a craft?
Yes. Yes. Okay, so, yeah. Yeah, New York, I went out in the park, up at actually the highest part of New York, up north. And this craft, round craft, moved across the sky. It was the archetypal UFO. If anybody had ever wanted to come up with a drawing of a UFO, it would look like that. It was a UFO. And as it disappeared over the horizon, a little guy, maybe, I don't know, about 8 or 9 maybe, with somewhat of a European accent, just wandered up to us. He'd noticed us looking at the sky and took a photograph of it. Oh, he said, don't worry about it. It's just a star car. Now, it sent shivers. I'm actually getting shivers down my spine right now. I'd never heard that. It wasn't, it wasn't in the sort of lexicon of science fiction and stuff like that. Star car. I never heard of it. So I said, what's a star car? And out it came. Oh, it's a 1 or 2 person craft used by explorers or tourists. Blah 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 blah. And my goodness, what was going on? Obviously, he came over the next 20 minutes, I came to realize that he had somehow was patched in or channeling the people in the craft, because there's certainly two of the statements certainly were. One thing, he stood up, he said, "We haven't seen a film on this planet for 10,000 years." And the other one was caveman to civilization overnight. Now this is a sort of eight-year-old. And, so I got into asking him, about politics, out there, and whether the warlike planets, oh yes, they're 8 or 10, we just leave them alone, which of course makes sense. On and on. And it was just wonderful. And I managed to get a lot of this into my first book. I was taking notes on the back of the cigarette paper. Fascinating stuff. And then, within a couple of weeks, there was a guy up in Toronto who angels were talking through him. Some friends of mine knew about it. I went up there. We spent another few weeks talking with these angels, and these were the ones who told me I could do it for myself. Just to loop back to that, So that's kind of experientially how it happened over really quite a quick, kind of 2-month period, I guess. And then, the heat really started when I thought to myself, now, okay, this is something I really am interested in. Because after my NDE, I realized, well, the first thing I realized that everything was fine, everything was under control. So there was really nothing to be concerned about. But I knew that there were certain things that humanity, or aspects of humanity, were now more ready for, just as I was more ready for an understanding of angels after my NDE. And I think that's of increasing value, put it that way. I don't say people should turn away from their everyday lives, because that's really where we learn. We learn the most important things, in terms of relationships and how to treat people and how to greet events with love rather than with fear. Those are all the lessons in there. So once we get those lessons dealt with, then the kind of books that I'm writing will be of more help to people.
Well, let me ask you this, and probably to summarize, what should people most be doing or focusing on? Particularly what the angels are saying, what are the most important lessons for people to learn right now?
I would hesitate to generalize on that. But I think to answer the question behind the question, I would say that to really understand that in each situation we have, we can greet it with love or we can greet it with fear. We can greet it with openness and interest, or we can greet it with closed-mindedness and self-centeredness and aggression. And, as we go through life, each of these situations basically cleans us out, if you like. If we make the choice to greet a difficult situation with love and with openness, this both changes the world, on that weird sort of level that everybody talks about, of whatever, something flying in one side of the world, creating a storm on the other side of the world, on that sort of level. But most deeply, it actually affects us. It makes us, if I could put it secretly, a better person. And I don't think I need to define what a better person is, because I think we all know what a good person is. I mean, just as we all know what a bad person is. They might disguise themselves for a while, but sooner or later we know what a bad person is. And this is all back again to trusting our intuitions, not having to trust, a government that lies to us, or scientists that really kind of more flummery than anything else, or priests that, well, we know what priests do. We have to learn this depth of trust in ourselves, in our own intuitions. Because we do know, we all know what is right and what is wrong, and we all have God in our hearts. I mean, that's really a weird thing to say, but we all are indwelt by the great God, and that is why angels love us so much. They're not indwelt by God.
Interesting. So in those difficult situations, because sometimes that's hard to enact and remember when things get stressful, and so in those difficult moments, what's the best way to meet situations with love instead of fear, as you say?
Well, be cool.
Okay.
Keep one's cool. That's the first thing. What's so interesting, you see? I mean, okay, let's say that's the basic sort of the ground, as one aspires to be cool. But as things come up, and this is why extraterrestrials are so terrifying for people. It's not that they're so terrifying. It is because the vibrational, I don't know what to put it, the speed they vibrate at, if you like, it's just a little bit higher than us. Right? And of course, that brings stuff out in us. Right? And if we have fears, and most of us do, because we're swimming in a sea of fear, then those fears are sort of, ignited, if you like. And the same thing with love. I've come across, for instance, certainly more than 4 or 5 people who've been taken into spaceships, the abduction business, and have been greeted and has really, been treated as kings. Had a wonderful time. Nothing like all these other situations with things plunging into you and everything like that. So, it's a very complex planet. One of the things that most extraterrestrials have difficulty with is because we are such a vast collection of different thinking, different beings, different ideas. There's no overall coherence to get their hands into. Thank God in many ways. I think they probably have done more here by now if they could get a grasp on things. But I think we've been saved from that.
Do you think that there are different, something that I hear people talking about often is people talking about warring groups of extraterrestrials, much like the war in heaven, that there are many different competing groups?
There are different agendas. I wouldn't say competing so much, because this planet, for a whole series of other reasons that we haven't talked about, is actually a very, very important planet. On a much larger frame, it's an important planet. That's why there are so many extraterrestrial races have expressed such interest in us. And as far as I know, there's something between 75, Billy Meyer says, and I think 150, somebody else is saying. Different races, right? And everybody has a slightly different agenda, and they're all kind of in contact with each other, and they're all, jockeying the thing along, If we need a little bit of, spice up here, there'll be a little spice over here. It's a family affair. It's a big game, but it's a family affair. And everybody wants to be here. Something's coming down the pike. I don't know when, but I would give it sometime over the next 5 to 10 years, I would say.
What do you mean by that? What specifically?
Well, different ways of looking at it. One way is looking at how bad can things get.
Depends on how the election goes, I think.
What's that?
It depends on how the election goes, I think.
Oh, no, it is far worse than that. No, this is to do with the deterioration of the biosphere, which is far worse than anybody has any idea. Because everything's interacting now, you can't just isolate one bit of the biosphere and say, oh my goodness, the trees are all going, or the ants are all going, or the bees are all dying. Now it's all happening at once, and everything is affecting everything else. So things are getting pretty ropey. So that's one way of looking at it. Another way of looking at it is that we really are moving towards a period of rejoining the galactic community, of being welcomed back into the larger fold of realizing we have been really screwed up and screwing ourselves up for thousands and thousands of years, and really sort of moving into a real deep understanding of who we are, where we've come from, and a will to start over and to make things right. And then there are other things. I mean, the angels say they don't know what's going to happen. Even they don't know what's going to happen, right? And in my experience, I can come up with some good ideas, but God can always come up with better ones. So I tend to leave it alone. I just know it's going to be wonderful. Whatever it is, it's going to be a real trip.
Well, that's hopeful.
What's that?
That's very hopeful.
Oh, yeah. Oh, no, it's a very positive picture. But it's deeply positive. It's not superficially positive. You're going to see, a lot of scrambling is going to go on, as there is now. You can see, the social situation over the last 15 years. It's really gotten very, very, very difficult, on a global level. Much more difficult than it was. And we're going to see more and more of it. So yeah, it's going to be scrappy.
But hopeful in the end, I hope. So, but that sounds great. Well, we should probably come to a close. We're at the hour mark, but that was an excellent conversation. And thank you for passing all that information on.
My pleasure. Yeah. It was a real and thank you so much. Although you may not have read the book, I think you have an intuitive understanding of what I'm going on about.
Yes. So the book is called Awakening of the Watchers, and it is out now from Inner Traditions, and there's several more in the series, which to get caught up with. So I'm looking forward to sitting down with those soon.
Good.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Good. Bye-bye.
Okay.